In 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, an event that threatened the stability of the global oil supply and prompted the United States to intervene in what became known as the First Gulf War. On October 10, 1990, Nayirah, a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl, testified before the US Congress. She claimed to have witnessed Iraqi soldiers committing horrific acts, taking babies out of incubators and throwing them on the cold floor to die. Her emotional testimony had a profound impact on American public opinion and was used by the media and politicians, including President George H.W. Bush, to garner support for military intervention in the Gulf War. But later investigations revealed that Nayirah's testimony was fabricated. The incubator incident was a complete lie. She was not a nurse, but a daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States. Nayirah even took acting lessons beforehand in order to deliver the convincing, emotional performance. This event shows that conspiracies exist, not as idle theories, but as meticulously planned, successful deceptions by powerful people. And while not all conspiracy theories are true, history proves that some are completely real. Let's explore more of them. The official version of the incident was that on August 2, 1964, a clash between a US destroyer and 3 North Vietnamese vessels took place. Then, on August 4th, 2 US destroyers were allegedly attacked again by North Vietnamese vessels in international waters. As a result of these outrageous and unprovoked attacks from North Vietnam, the US Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which gave President Lyndon Johnson a free hand to deploy US military forces to South Vietnam and begin the war against North Vietnam. Over the next 10 years, between 1 and 3 million people died in the Vietnam War. 4 decades later, it was revealed that what actually occurred was very different from the government's story. While the initial naval incident on August 2nd did occur, it was in response to American provocations. The second reported incident on August 4th was a false report that never actually happened. The National Security Agency deliberately skewed intelligence to create the impression that a second unprovoked attack had been carried out. A day later, on August 5th, Lyndon Johnson used these incidents to convince Congress to pass the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. Both he and his Secretary of Defense, Robert McNamara, presented the events, especially the second one, as unprovoked attacks and hid the fact that the US was involved in provocations in the area. In a 2003 documentary, Robert McNamara admitted that there was no attack on August 4th, and in 2005, declassified documents from the NSA officially validated the true line of events. At the time, the most important foreign policy theory in the US was the domino theory, which said that if one country in Southeast Asia fell to communism, the entire region would follow. This false theory provided a justification for intervention. Ultimately, the Vietnam War became a disaster for the US, with over 60,000 US soldiers dying, alongside millions of civilians across Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. Despite the intervention, the North won, and Vietnam is still ruled by a communist party. The Gulf of Tonkin incident was a conspiracy to wage a conventional war abroad, but during the same era, the US government was also secretly engaged in another, more sinister kind of war, one waged on the human mind itself. In the early years of the Cold War, rumors circulated in the US that communist regimes were mastering mind control and psychological torture used to force confessions and manipulate human behavior. The official response from the CIA was to publicly denounce such tactics. The actual response, however, was to launch its own secret program. Starting in 1953 and running for 2 decades until 1973, the CIA secretly ran Project MK-Ultra, an illegal human experimentation program aimed at developing drugs and procedures for mind control and interrogation. The experiments conducted in universities, hospitals, and prisons across the US and Canada used hundreds of sub-projects to explore various methods, including the covert, non-consensual administration of high doses of LSD and other chemicals to both unwitting citizens and incarcerated individuals. The CIA even operated secret safe houses where agents would monitor people after secretly dosing them. The use of electroshock therapy at levels far exceeding therapeutic norms, sensory deprivation, isolation, and various types of abuse. Psychic driving and depatterning. Patients were subjected to medically induced prolonged sleep, and exposed to the same looped recorded messages for up to 20 hours a day in an attempt to completely erase their personalities and reprogram them. Many of the thousands of subjects or prisoners, psychiatric patients, or vulnerable individuals who were experimented on without their knowledge, often resulting in permanent psychological damage. Meanwhile, the rumors of the government's mind control program were long dismissed as pure paranoia. The people that claimed such programs exist were called crazy and ridiculed. The truth only came to light because of a clumsy cover-up. In 1973, fearing exposure during the Watergate scandal, then CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all MKUltra records to be destroyed. While the bulk of the files were successfully purged, a small cache of misfiled financial documents survived. These documents were later uncovered in 1977 via a Freedom of Information Act request, leading to the Charge Committee Senate hearings that officially validated the existence of Project MKUltra. The conspiracy of government brainwashing was proven true, but the full extent of the program may never be known due to the deliberate destruction of evidence. Imagine that US military leaders proposed staging terrorist attacks on American soil, including the shooting of innocent people and the sinking of boats full of Cuban refugees, all to blame the enemy and justify war. This wasn't a thriller novel, it was the reality of Operation Northwoods. During the height of the Cold War in 1962, the US Joint Chiefs of Staff, seeking an immediate pretext for a military invasion to overthrow Cuban leader Fidel Castro, developed a stunning proposal codenamed Operation Northwoods. This top-secret plan detailed a series of false flag operations to create massive public support for a war against Cuba. The proposals included manufacturing air attacks. The plan involved flying an empty civilian aircraft that had been secretly repainted to look like a US Air Force plane, faking a shootdown over Cuba, and manufacturing casualty lists in US newspapers. Staging a Cuban terror campaign in US cities, including bombings in Miami and Washington, D.C., and sinking a boat of Cuban refugees that would be blamed on Cuban forces. A scenario was even drafted that involved sabotaging a manned space flight and blaming the disaster on Cuban interference. The document authors noted that these contrived situations were inherently extremely risky in our democratic system, suggesting that the participation of US personnel should be limited to the most highly trusted covert personnel. The extraordinary part of this conspiracy is that it was never carried out. The entire proposal was presented by Chairman Lyman Lemnitzer to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara, but was forcefully rejected by President John F. Kennedy. For decades, the idea that US military leaders would conspire to murder their own citizens to start a war was unthinkable, the epitome of a crazy conspiracy theory. The truth, however, was verified by the government itself when the documents detailing Operation Northwoods were declassified in 1997. The documents provide undeniable proof that a genuine, high-level plot to fabricate the pretext for war, a conspiracy against the American public, was drafted and authorized by the Joint Chiefs. The cases so far all trace back to government agencies, but the most lethal and longest-running deception was a purely corporate one. It was a conspiracy over a product that killed millions, a meticulously orchestrated campaign of deception waged by the world's largest tobacco companies. The official narrative about smoking dangers was one of slow scientific discovery, but the reality was a decades-long, carefully orchestrated conspiracy of deception waged by the world's largest tobacco companies. This corporate campaign deliberately created confusion about products that killed millions. By the early 1950s, independent scientific studies conclusively linked cigarette smoking to lung cancer. Faced with an existential threat to their product, the major US tobacco CEOs secretly met in New York City in December 1953 to devise a unified strategy. Their plan, executed with the help of a major public relations firm, was not to find a safer cigarette, but to manufacture doubt about the science. This campaign began with a full-page advertisement titled "A Frank Statement to Cigarette Smokers," published in hundreds of US newspapers in 1954, which denied the link to cancer and promised to prioritize public health. This frank statement was a charade designed to suit public fears and buy the industry time. Internal documents revealed decades later through lawsuits proved that the industry knew the truth and was actively lying. These documents showed that they knew about cancer. Internal research acknowledged as early as the 1950s that the chemical agents in tobacco smoke were carcinogenic. They knew nicotine was addictive, while tobacco executives testified under oath to Congress in 1994 that they did not believe nicotine to be addictive. Internal documents from the 1960s and 70s show they were fully aware of nicotine's addictive properties and manipulated the chemical composition of cigarettes to optimize nicotine delivery and keep users hooked. They falsely marketed low-tar and light cigarettes as a safer alternative to prevent smokers from quitting, even though their own scientists knew these products were no less harmful. The conspiracy was officially validated in 2006 when a US federal court judge found the major tobacco companies guilty of violating civil racketeering laws and engaging in a decades-long scheme to defraud the American public. The judge explicitly concluded that the tobacco companies conspired to violate the substantive provisions of RICO. As part of the court-ordered remedy for this massive crime against public health, the companies were forced to run an extensive, court-mandated campaign of corrective statements in newspapers and on television, admitting the truth about the deadly consequences of smoking and their own deception. These conspiracies were called crazy until they were proven true. With this kind of history, it's no wonder so many people question official stories like 9/11 or the Kennedy assassination. What else might be hidden? Let me know what you think in the comments. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a like and subscribe.